Personal Log, Commander Timoteusz Sorensen, Vanguard Delta-Se. It's been a number of years since I last served under a Davian banner. At that time, the Third Succession War was still raging strong. So it's just my luck that the first contract my company gets has a Davian seal stamped on it. No sense in turning it away though, given that the previous commander had run off with most of the company's finances. The war had drawn to a close a few months ago, and he clearly expected work to begin drying up, so we bailed out. Things wouldn't be so bad if he hadn't burnt all his connections on the way out, however. So we were basically forced to start from scratch. Either way, the rest of us had nothing better to do with our lives, so we set about salvaging our company. After getting everyone's approval to rechristen the company, I agreed to a parley. The request had come from a planet in the Acala system. Some friend of the local leadership was in need of protection for a supply shipment that needed to make its way off-world. Opposition was expected to be light, but our patrons were nonetheless willing to invest in some insurance. The negotiation was fairly simple, and we settled on taking a bigger cut of salvage in exchange for lowering our price. Regardless, for a mission like this, an extra 68,000 wasn't terrible. Our mech lineup wasn't terribly heavy on tonnage, but it would suffice. Apart from my Varus, the same Assassin 21 I piloted while serving in the Davian Armed Forces, we only had a few light mechs. The Welder, a Firestarter 9H that's been a favorite of our close-range specialists. The Dart, a Javelin 10A which was armed with nothing more than a LRM-15. And a pair of Wasp 1As, the Liquid and the Solid. We had a third one that was called the Vapor, but it sort of went up in smoke. As to the crew roster for the mission, it was a fairly easy pick. Partially because it didn't much matter who would go, and partially because the only mercs who stuck around after the commander left were either green or desperate. Mostly green, though. For this mission, I took Condor, a lass with a bit of a wild streak, good fit for the Welder if ever there was one. Music Box. She's somewhat quiet and calculating from what I've seen, so I put her in the Dart. Ninja, a relatively calm fellow with a bit of a mama bear complex. I had him pilot the Liquid for lack of a better mech, but I had confidence that he would keep his cool. Lastly, I decided to drop in with my Varus on the off chance that we would run into heavier opposition. It was around mid-morning when our lance touched down, with a hill between us and the settlement where we were meant to rendezvous with the convoy. Seeing as nothing had shown up on radar yet, we moved to form a relaxed perimeter around the rendezvous, giving the convoy the all-clear to move out. Before we could get too comfortable, however, we picked up a radar signature on an intercept course. I gave Ninja an order to fall back so that I could move in and draw fire off of what turned out to be a Firestarter 9H, while he shepherded the convoy forward. Meanwhile, Music Box advanced while laying down a burst of LRM fire with Condor close behind. The enemy mech took the bait and focused his fire on the Varus. The APCs attached to the convoy proved to be useful as well, coordinating their missile fire with Music Box. We began to tighten the noose on our lone adversary. As Condor opened up the Firestarter's left torso, I pivoted to their flank in the hopes that focused fire on the target would remove some of its weapon options. I drew in too close, however, and the enemy was able to return fire, damaging my mech's ablative left arm. Fortunately, that also left our foe wide open to a sustained volley from the APCs in our four mechs. Finally, after several shots fired, Condor was finally able to remove the damaged left torso, giving me clear access to the CT, and thus I was able to dial in the kill. Just as we were about to call in for extraction, another Leopard streaked in above the lake to our right. Amusingly, the enemy dropped off no more than a single Locust 1V, which Music Box proceeded to suppress with LRM. After Condor and I took our stabs at the poor bastard, our APCs dealt the final blows to the Locust, which convinced its pilot to bug out. The rest of the extraction went along swiftly, and, As our charge took off into orbit, we set about gathering our spoils from the field. All told, there wasn't much that was worth taking off of the field. The Firestarter was little more than a smoking husk after what I'd done to it, but we were able to retrieve its right limbs. The Locust was remarkably intact, though wholly useless as a mech. Either way, we took several of its components, if only to sell them off later. Otherwise, we came away with an extra medium laser, a trio of MGs, a flamer, a few small jump jets, and a couple of MG ammo casings. The rest wasn't worth our time to recover. Once we had sorted things out with the local defense forces, we got back aboard our Leopard and headed for the ship. On our ride back, we intercepted a number of broadcasts concerning more pirate activity planetside. No sooner had we gotten back aboard the ship than my XO was informing me of another call for help. The call was coming from the same settlement where we performed our escort duties mere hours ago. The local government had dispatched some field medics after our departure as part of a plan to establish a forward base against the local pirate threat. Turns out that the morons who were left behind to garrison the settlement had run off to chase some squirrels and were promptly cut off. And so it was that another force of pirates was bearing down on the settlement in revenge. The negotiation was light this time around. The local government didn't have the time, and I had lost the patience. We settled on a payment of 111,000 sea bills and a moderate pick of salvage. We did a rapid armor refit on the Varus' arm, and set out with the same roster, mechs and pilots alike. We touched down behind the same hill and made our approach. Unlike that morning, the enemy was already advancing upon the base. Luckily, there was only a Wasp 1A. Ninja, having sat out most of the action that morning, engaged his jump jets and connected a medium laser with his opposite number. Salvos from Condor and Music Box opened up several of the Wasp's components, and my own fire opened up its center torso. The enemy Wasp maneuvered away in an attempt to flee from our force, but Ninja jumped in behind, destroyed its left torso, and the pilot punched out seconds later. Damage to the settlement? Minimal. I was pleased to discover that not everyone in the local government was incompetent, as our convoy was equipped with an ECM field. It also meant that our patrons were wealthier than they had been letting on. For a backwater, they had access to some fairly rare tech. Not unexpectedly, a reinforcing lance touched down to harry our extraction efforts, comprising another Firestarter 9H, and this time a Jenner 7D. A more substantial force, but one that was nonetheless outnumbered. I gave the order to focus all weapons on the Firestarter, and although he was briefly able to return fire my way, again damaging the ablative arm, our combined barrage rattled the pilot's nerves, and after getting flamed by Condor, they punched out. With that one out of the way, Music Box was inspired to charge into melee with the Jenner, heavily damaging its right leg while my own shots opened up the CT. Not content to go down easy, the Jenner's pilot turned his attention towards Ninja, shooting off the liquid's ablative arm. After another set of salvos from the whole team, spreading damage all over the Jenner, I finally managed to take off its left leg. Ninja got the last laugh though when he took off the left torso, spooking the pilot enough to bail. Extraction went off without a hitch, and we prepared to receive the rest of the pirate force. 75 minutes later, we got confirmation that the wayward garrison had broken through and would relieve us in another 20. With Music Box and myself on Overwatch, we began the salvage op before the locals could interfere. Once it was all said and done, our clients threw in a bonus 30% for our efforts, though most of it was no doubt for us to keep quiet about the ECM tech. We lucked out on our salvage op, managing to bag most of the Firestarter chassis, as well as a Jenner part and some Wasp bits. Aside from that, we only managed to pull an extra flamer, an SRM-4 and a couple of jump jets before the prodigal defenders made their gallant return. As we settled in for the ride back to the ship, I made sure to impress upon our XO the importance of not picking up the phone until I was back on board. As soon as we were back, I ordered our navigator to jump to any of the neighboring systems. I had no intention of getting caught dealing with the mess that was unfolding on Acala.